All right. So the lecture today now will be on particles and how to create particles, emit from an emitter, a surface, how to get particles spit out into the environment, then changing its behavior, having the particles do things based on forces, could be wind, could be gravity, things that hit the particle. We're going to do that as a phase, and also examine the way particles can collide and hit objects and things. So let's just start with an emitter. So we're going to go to effects here in our menu set, and we go to N particles, and we'll go create emitter. Yes, there's an option box, and in it you can create an omni emitter, directional, or volume. I would want an omni, so don't have to default that. And it looks like nothing happened, but if you click play, it's going to rain these particles down on you. I don't know if you can see that. And they're just going to fall. And we only have 120 frames here. So let's give it a lot more. Let's put in like 2 grand, 2,000. And another thing you want to do is make sure you set here in your settings, playback speed in your animation preferences, tip to write down, play every frame. Have that play every frame. Save. And the reason for doing that is particles love to crash, love to slow down and crash Maya. Okay, now we're going to play the same thing for 2,000 frames. And it's going to rain down particles from an emitter kind of continually. And actually, if we turn it and let's look at it from the start. And all I did, by the way, again, is create emitter. I said N particles, create emitter. And it was an omni emitter. And it's just this little sphere in space. And then if we play it, it's going to emit particles, and those particles will fall forever. They will just fall and fall and fall and fall and fall. You know, nothing is going to stop it. And that means more and more particles will be on screen the longer it plays. So it can get very complicated. But the good news is all particles are dots. They don't hold any surface, barely any information, but 3 Cartesian points in X, Y, and Z. They're points in space. That's all they are, and that's all they hold. So that's why we can have so many of them. We could have millions of them, and it won't crash. But, you know, better not say that. We'll see. Anyway, we see what's kind of like turning on a hose and letting them just leak out. Let's look at in the outliner what parts. You all can see that window, right? The outliner window here. Okay, so we have the emitter. That's part of the anatomy, and that's the thing that's like the faucet that the water comes through. And then the particle itself, that you see a box around it, but if you hit 4, you see the particle selected. If you hit 5, it puts a box around it. It's just different ways of selecting the same thing. 4, it's like that. Okay, so this outliner is where I can make sure I know what I'm grabbing, or I can grab through the scene. There's changes I can make to the emitter, and there's changes I can make to the particle. And if you click the emitter, we see in the channel box a bunch of things we can change. Rate, that's the rate of particles coming out. We can make that higher. Say it's the default's 200. Let's look at that. We can't see them, so let me make them brighter. There's 200 coming out. I could change that from 200 to higher. So click the emitter, and I can make the rate. What if I made it 300? What would that look like? Okay, more particles are coming out. There's another way we could do that. If we select the emitter and hit T as in Tom, it's right here. That is the manipulator tool for what this emitter can do and change. So again, if I select the emitter and hit T, what happens is it puts this little switch here. And you see where the rate, it says rate. Well, if I grab that and move it, I can change the rate here. It's the same thing as changing here. You see it? Change it both places. If I put the rate up to 1600, it's going to be really dense. It's really going to shower it. Okay. If I put, let's hit T again and select the emitter and hit T again and put the rate down really low to maybe 17, it's going to be very few. It's going to trickle out like that. All right, so it's convenient that we can select the emitter and let's put the rate maybe about 300. Let's split it in half, maybe 230 or so. And then there's also a switch down here. If I click this little blue guy, it switches it to another thing, and that says speed. And it imitates what's going on in this channel box too. There's speed stuff right here, speed 1. Well, I can make the speed faster or slower. You see a change here as well. I have a choice. Either I can enter it here or I can interactively change it here. If I made the speed 7.6, what would happen? They would really shoot out with velocity. Now they're kind of spraying out more all over the place because the speed is higher. If I don't like that, I can take the speed down. Make sure I got the right one. Speed. If I put the speed really low, what would that look like? Be dripping out, right? Gravity would be pulling it down a little bit more. All right. So let's put the speed maybe just around 1.3. Okay, and if you keep hitting it, if you keep hitting the switch, it goes to a few more features. But anyhow, all the features are imitated here as well. So that's an emitter, and it's a 1-point emitter that's come to omni emitter that's going in all directions, but it has this little N here, and N is for Newtonian, as in Isaac Newton, right? So it has a gravity pulling it down, and you see the direction it's pulling it down. Well, you can play with that too. And the nucleus, you can play with how it's changing, right? So if I grab this N that's pointing down as a nucleus, it's a Newtonian force nucleus that's pulling things in a gravitational way toward the Earth, which is a complete scientific misnomer if I said it wrong just like that scientifically. It's not actually a force at all. It's the bending of time-space that pulls, something to something else, actually. It's not a pull, but it's imitating that in the software, right? So here we have gravity on 9.8. That's a simulation of, quote, Earth's gravity. It's a 9.8 value it put it at. If I put it at half that, like, well, let's put it at maybe 3.5. And let's see how it affects. Play it. Actually, I don't know if that number took. Didn't take. I have to type it again. 3.5, enter. There we go. Let's play it again. And each time I have to play it from the beginning, right? Because it's running out particles. I have to go back to frame 1. And already it's having a little hiccup here. And then play it again. And let's see how it changed. Okay, now you see how it's like jumping out a little bit. It has more spring to it because it's not pulled downward as heavily by gravity. Let's make it even lighter and see what happens. Let's click the nucleus and let's put the gravity on like 1. Okay, enter, make sure it takes it, enter, and go rewind back to the beginning before you do it, and then play it from the beginning. So you get this more lighter fireworks, confetti look and effect. Can you all see the particles okay? Are they coming through on the screen? I don't know if they're contrasty enough.
Yeah, they're coming through.
They're coming through, thank you. All right, now what would happen? What do you think is gonna happen if I put in the nucleus -1? What do you think is gonna happen? Make sure I got it in there. Oh, I put in the wrong one, didn't I? Let's see. -1. I'm going to back up for a second. Okay. So we have gravity. Yeah, I put in the right one. Gravity's on 1, and I put it in -1. Okay, there we go. So it actually goes up, right? So maybe before it was kind of Moon's gravity, and before that was Earth's gravity at 9.8 units. And this one is -1. So the atmospheric density is pushing it up. So this is the behavior for steam. This is why it rises and steam rises and smoke. So that's what you could do to create smoke. And you could put this, you know, anywhere in your landscape if you want to create that. And now I talked about, I'm going to take a couple, maybe it's 3:08 right now. I am going to see a few more things and we're going to take a short break and return. One thing I told you that we do in this part is talk about emitters, talk about particles, what they are, and then put forces on them to change the behavior. Right now, there's a force on it called nucleus gravity. But let's say we want to disturb some of those and make them more like smoke. Stop the animation, and with the particle selected, you could go to field solvers. And here's a bunch of forces and fields we can put it on. It's very interesting that they rename this. This used to be called forces and now it's named fields because it's scientifically more accurate to call something a magnetic field or a gravitational field than to call it a force, right? Because it really isn't a force. Scientifically, it's a field. So here we have air, drag, gravity again, Newton for that. That's the Newtonian thing. Talked about Newton. Radial, turbulence, vortex. This one right here is very useful, called turbulence. If I click turbulence, see, let's watch it move before I put turbulence on. And it's almost like champagne bubbles, just nicely, elegantly moving up. But what if this were like swarms of flies zooming around? And that's, we're trying to get the behavior of the particle. Well, what if we disturb the particles more and put a field on it of turbulence? So you select the particles and click turbulence. All right, and then you have a bunch of stuff here you can change. Magnitude, you can put up the magnitude. All this is because interactively you had T selected for the manipulator. And we can just see how it behaves right out of the box here. Let's see, so can you see that okay? Okay, if we put the magnitude down, there's a little bit of disturbance or turbulence. If you put it down really small, they come out not as smooth as champagne bubbles, but they're a little bit disturbed, you know? But if you want to really make them look like flies, you could put it much higher. There's these other things, attenuation, how they die, how the effect dies out or not. There's frequency. So you hit the switch, there's phase. So if we put the magnitude really high, it would be really chaotic. It would be like birds or flies going everywhere all around. As soon as it gets out of the gate of the emitter, it's going to go in a more wild direction like that. So that's how you might do smoke that's hit by wind and it's wisping around, or it's might how you do insects. etc. There's another one. Let's put the magnitude down a little bit, maybe to, I don't know, around there, maybe around 10. Okay, there's another one that's interesting called vortex, and that's going to spin the particles in a cyclone fashion, as you might think. And it has a very similar manipulator with its magnitude that you could put up or down and attenuation. And here you could see them now whipping into a big circle. You can see how strong the force is, or the field is. And maybe you could see it better if we back off a little bit and where all these particles are going. So put the magnitude really high, and you can change the attenuation. So it goes and it whips into this feverish storm, this tempest happening. You could, play with these. Okay, and all these particles are endlessly being emitted. Now, this is a little bit like creating a galaxy, right? Or a solar system spinning. So kind of a scientific moving stellar landscape you could do this way. Right now, we're just trying to nail the behavior of the particle, and then we can talk about its appearance and attributes. All right, so there's different things. I'm going to take a break just in 30 seconds. I just want to let you know that these particles are
I just thought
emitting.
when you said vortex, I thought like teleporter mostly.
Yeah, like
not galaxy.
like
Vortex.
Yeah, it could be anything that you want in your imagination, and it's so simple to do. It's definitely harder to explain than just to do, and you try it yourself, and it just falls into place.
Professor?
But the thing, yeah, go right ahead.
I'm sorry. I have a question. I don't know if you can
Sure.
answer it before or after our break, but does Maya give you an option to change the shape of the particles themselves?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do is we're going to, in a minute, we're going to, less than a minute, take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk just about that. First things we're going to do is we're going to get the behavior of the particle. Right now, they're not renderable. There's nothing to render. These are just unrenderable points that have a certain behavior. Then we're going to give it an appearance. We can change the shape of the particle. We can replace it with something else. Yeah, definitely. But just the last thing, go ahead.
Are the particles currently selected?
Yeah, right now they're selected. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No wonder.
That's why they look that way. It looks like, oh, they're already stars, but no, I just made the field black and made they're nothing really. If we rendered it, it would be pure black. Pure black.
Okay.
But the last thing I wanted to say are this emitter, these are emitting forever. Like, do you see them cutting off? That is the cutting plane of Maya. They're not disappearing actually. They're getting so dispersed that Maya can't even see them anymore. So mathematically, these are being endlessly produced from that emitter. So another thing we can change about the behavior is to have it stop emitting at some point. And if you wanted to make it more like a firework, you could animate the rate of the emitter. So let me just show this, and then we'll go on that break. So if I selected the emitter here, and I went to the rate, and I put the rate like, let's go to like frame 50, and I'm going to put the rate at 0. Keyframe. Then, just like 3 or 4 frames later, put the rate on like really high number, like 12,000. Right? Keyframe. Then put it at 0. So right after, a little bit like this, and then it stops emitting again, right? So what do you think is going to happen? Now we're controlling the emission to be on or off by animating the rate. So when we do that, we're going to get something like this. I think you can't see it though. Wait. emitter. So it's emitting between that and it's going to 1,000. Oh, it's not probably not enough time for it to emit particle. Tell you what, it is coming up. So I need just to put the rate much higher for you to see it, but it's a little explosion there and then it cuts off the rate. Let's go with the emitter over time. We see the rate here. That is 12,000. It goes from 12,000. It's going to go from 0 to really quick to 12,000. And then it's not going to emit anymore, right? So that is like an explosion. It's going to stop emitting from the center. And it looks like it's still emitting a little bit. Those are little wisps that are left. But if you wanted to create something that's more like an explosion, you see it stopped emitting and all the materials are being flung out into space. That's an important thing to know as you control the emitter. And remember, I'm not doing it myself. I should recall myself. You have to put it back at frame 0 or 1 and play it from the beginning in order to see it. You want to see it kind of clearly. Let's look at the particle and let's look at it this way. Just wait for it. And there it is. So it's like an explosion that flings particles out in space and stops emitting. That's another important behavior that you probably have to control to do particle effects. Just a very basic you'd have to know, right? And you can make the explosion even more sudden by putting these very close together, right? And it may crash because it's saying the evaluation can't handle it, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's going to be a little faster now, the explosion. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that's the real basics of particles and emitting them just from a single point and changing the basics of its behavior. Let's pick this up. Let's take a break. Part 2, where we're going to go into the attributes of the particle and change those attributes and those other items in which I spoke. So we have this from last time. We learned to animate the rate to simulate an explosion or whipping out of matter that's on or off with the quickly animated rate of the emitter, right? The rate is 0, has right-click animation keys on there to fling the rate up really quickly and highly to 12,000 and then shoot it off really quickly. And that's how you can create kind of a feeling of an explosion. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about with the behavior. Let's look a little more about all the things in behavior with the emitter by just clicking Control A, and we have the attribute editor. We have in here in the emitter tab, that's the same thing as going into the detail of the emitter in the channel box, but it's displayed wider here. We have the type, we can switch it to directional surface. Let's just keep that the same. We have stuff we can on the nucleus tab change. We have the particle shape. We have something called lifespan. And this is the rate. Well, it's going to come out forever. When we first open the, backing up, let's get another emitter, but we said n particles and we create a new particle emitter, create emitter. Okay. And it has a new particle. It's starting to emit the particles forever right here. It's starting to emit them. Maybe we'll back up a little bit. Anyway, actually, let's start anew. I'm just going to get a new screen here. Maybe I will save this though. Yeah, sure. Okay, particles. Okay, and fine. Let's just start with a brand new when we talk about the behavior of the particle. And I'm changing the background color. You see me do that. You might have been wondering. If you hold Option or Alt on a PC and hit B, just holding Option and hitting B, it changes to these different color backgrounds just so we can see some things a little better in contrast. So let me go back to maybe the gray one here. And let's get a new particle. Let's go to End Particles. Again, we're in Menu Set Effects. And I'm going to End Particles, and I'm going to say Create Emitter. And we'll see that emit. And I told you before that they emit forever, as long as the timeline lasts. At 120, it's going to be appearing for that long. But if you have like 2,000, it's going to be emitting for 2,000 frames. So put in 10,000. For 10,000. So it emits for as long and is displayed for as long as the range slider timeline's on. But if you wanted to change that and have it emit for a shorter time, there's two ways to do it, right? I already showed you one way. What was that? The rate. You could animate the rate to go to 0. I showed you do that in exposure. If you just had the rate animated to 0, it would be like turning off the faucet and it would stop emitting. That's one way. And remember, that's under the nucleus of it. Let's go back to, maybe it's easier here to see in the channel box, and you're going to see the emitter part of it, and you're going to change the rate here under the emitter part of it to, at some point, 0. You can animate it so it closes off the spigot, so to speak, and it turns it off so it doesn't emit. That's one way. But another way to just have it keep emitting, yet have the particles just die out, is you can change its lifespan. So maybe it's easier to here to see in the particle shape tab, attribute editor, lifespan mode defaults as live forever. So that means no matter how many particles going to spit out, those particles last forever. But if we put in a random range and it has a lifespan of 1 second, what's going to happen? So something like that, where it's going to spit them out, but they're all going to die after 1 second of screen time. So maybe you might want that because maybe you'll get too many particles. It's a little bit different than rate, right? Because it ends the particles' lives, therefore they stop, versus ending the rate of the emission of the particles. So that's two different aspects of the same thing. Very easy to change. It's right here. Constant, you could have them at a constant range of 1, and you can randomize the range. Putting it at, you're randomizing between 1 second and 10 seconds, right? Or between 1 second and 5 seconds. You could randomize that range, right? So you get like water droplets that tend to disintegrate or evaporate in the air, or steam or something that does. And yeah, we looked at other things, and we could change the direction of the gravity, didn't we? So this could look, more like -1, more like steam or something. So if that's steam flowing up, but then again, it kind of looks like champagne bubbles. If they effervescence and they pop or disintegrate at a certain point, this is how you do it, is in the lifespan. So lifespan is a little bit different than rate, but both are tools in order to change the appearance of simultaneous too many particles on screen at once. Okay, I think that really covers the basis of behavior of these particles. Now we can have it emit from a lot of different things. They don't have to just emit from an emitter. They can emit from, you can have particles emit from particles, in fact. You can have particles when they hit something, they break into smaller particles. And we talked about Houdini, that's really good for doing really complex things, like even more like that. And we can have it emit from the surface of your tube and just have something emit from a surface. We can show you that in a bit. I'm looking at the list here, and I said I was going to talk about next the adding attributes to the particle. So let's kind of look what we have here. What would be interesting is let's have this go back down. I think put the gravity back on like, oh, let's point 6.5 maybe. Maybe a little lighter. Let's put 4.5. Okay, so that's kind of nice. And you see it looks like salt or water droplets coming up. All right. And let's say we want to give these particles some appearance, because I mentioned if you render it, doesn't matter with what, in my software, there's going to be nothing there. Rendering it with Arnold's software, there's nothing there. There's really nothing to render. If you render it with the hardware renderer, it's going to see it, right? So you can render with the hardware render, and that's old school how some of this stuff was done, and composite it as a hardware render onto the software render, which looked nicer. And you can blur it and stuff here. But there's other options for saying, okay, well, we can't see a particle until it's a hardware render. But how do we see a particle in software? Or how do we make it have body or appearance or change the shape? Well, that would be in here. We would go, I would have the attribute editor open, and we have different tabs to look at. All right, so we have particle shape, a particle shape node. And we have a bunch of different things here we could possibly use. And we have in the emitter, let's look at the different things going on in here. We can change the per particle color. We can, this is an emitter. We can go to the particle shape. We can change the particle size here. And we have one that's render stats. We have per particle array here. All of these are changing each particle to look different and change the shape. And let me find something that we can actually see a little bit better. Under shading, do you know where we are? Okay, let's back up to orient everyone. We're an emitter. We've selected emitter, and we're an attribute A, Control A, that is the attribute editor. And we're going in the menu that says shading, and we have right here particle render type points. That is the default. They're points. Points are not renderable by software. But if we click this arrow, we have other choices. You see the ones that say S on them, SW? That means software wireframe, that these will be renderable in software, a software render. The ones that say S. The ones that don't say S, they're purely hardware renderable, only what you see in your viewport. So yeah, we can change these points to like multi-point, and they change a look, right? They change to look like different. But if we try to render them, same deal. If we use my software, nada, nothing there. But if we used hardware render, yeah, we could see them. Okay, there's one called multi-point. There's one called multi-streak. That gives a nice streaked look. Right? That looks a little more like splashing water. Again, you could render that only in the hardware render, but not any of these others. There's nothing there. Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with, this is the way, you know, a lot of folks do it, is render it with hardware render and use all the bells and buttons and whistles here to give it a really special soft look, and composite it later into a software, another layer with a soft bed render of software. But here's another one, interesting numeric. So you can see all the exact numeric positions of these points falling. It's kind of like the matrix. So if you really wanted to get to the nitty gritty of the location and behavior of the points, you could do that. Those little things are not renderable, even though numerics are not renderable by hardware. And there's points, we've already done them. There's spheres. So you click the render type to spheres and you have these bubble looking spheres happening. Okay. Let's stop that and see what's renderable. Hardware renderable, yes. Software renderable, no. All right, let's try sprites. What are sprites? We're going to get into that a little bit later. Sprites are replacement pieces of images. And maybe this was Eric Colato. Maybe were you talking about using sprites with Blender? You can use sprites, of course, with Maya, and this is replacing an image for each one. We're not going to use that quite yet. Let's try streaks, see what they look like. Kind of like multi-streaks, similar. Again, nothing with Maya, and with a hardware render, we'll see something. Okay, we see that. All right, now how about these? Blobby surface, that has an S on it. You see a little S inside. Blobby surface S, and yep, we see it in hardware, but let's try Maya software. Actually, this one we're gonna see in software as well. Okay, so if you have a software render, a one render thing going on, and you want to be able to see your particles in one pass, you could use any of these with an SW on them. Blobby surface, or you can use cloud. Okay, so you could change the shape with cloud. And that's renderable both in Maya and hardware. And there's tube. It's going to give you that effect. Again, here's the Maya software. It's going to render that in Maya. Now that looks very chunky. Of course, you can change the radius of them. You can change this kind of stuff, these attributes. Let's say if you had blobby surface, there's different ways you can put opacity scales on, all kinds of things you can play with to give them a less mathematical look. So that you would have to explore. If you didn't want white and you wanted to change the color to something else, each one of these has its own color selectors. You can change, you change the color over time. That within the spread of the emitting particles, you can have a rainbow effect that maybe it's a ball of flame like a meteor. It's really orangey hot at the head of it, and then it tails off into cool colors and then finally brown. You could do that without getting in all that detail. That's possible, just so you know, to change its appearance in many different ways. And as I mentioned, it's a per particle change. You can change each particle to emit differently, behave differently. And this is only just the very start. And for effects career, someone is asking about a career in effects animation. There's a deal of programming that could be involved, because within this, each particle can be scripted with the behavior. So we could put in what's called expressions, mathematical expressions on these values per particle: position, ramp, velocity, acceleration, color, map, PP, its lifespan per particle. You can have each particle have have uniquely different lifespan in the mind. So it gets kind of complex. So to do that, you'd have to know a little bit about how to write in MelScript. But for example, if you wanted particles to spell out somebody's name or do a certain type of a shape, and you wanted to, there's a way to do that with, I would do that particular thing by drawing a CV curve and having particles emit on the curve. But let's say more you are trying to create some unique effect you've seen in 4th of July with fireworks that blow up and they do one color and then they sparkle and emit more particles and they sparkle a different color, a very complex shape. You could program that with an expression. And this is a bit of a place where you can put in force and velocity and write a MEL expression here. It's usually equation of something equals something, create. And I have some ready, if anyone's interested in taking that far, I have 2 or 3 recipes that are cut and paste of a MEL expression that you can put in mass, lifespan PP, that you could put in ramp and position to change the unique behavior to a particle to do a specific thing. What specific thing? Well, one is what if you want the particles, some particles to be heavier than other particles, so they can fall and heavier particles will fall and bounce or have a different behavior when it hits. You could have some particles fall faster or heavier than other particles. You know, I know we know all objects without wind resistance in a vacuum fall at the same rate. I'm just talking about how to make an appearance. You could have some things break in a certain way and other things not. It gets endlessly able, only limited by your imagination. There's a way to do it. I'm just talking kind of the basics, and here through expressions, if you'd want to take it further, if you want to go into digital effects, this is just the foundation of where you would start thinking about this stuff. It's different than animations, creating systems and programming and interacting and doing a lot of trial and error. Okay, so we did that. We changed the different kinds of behavior of the particles. And now we've changed the appearance of the particles. We showed you a few other interesting things. And one is you can replace these particles with other things. You don't have to use any of these. Scroll up again. They're under shading. You don't have to use any of these if you don't want. I mean, we can put them back in points, what they were like at multi-points or points. Okay, defaulted at points. We can actually replace a particle with another object. Let's say, let's just create like a simple shape like a, I don't know, a cube here. It's a basic cube. And let's say that these were a kind of object in an explosion that is going to fly. I don't know what I'm making, like just kind of like it's a bow tie shape. Or maybe this could represent like a spaceship or a fly, maybe an armada of TIE fighter type Star Wars spaceships or something. And we can have each one attached to a particle and then spit out these objects. Or maybe this could be a swarm of flies and this could represent that. And it gets attached to a particle and then we could put, as we see, a force of turbulence on it. So we can use that to get a different looking object to look like it's emitting, all right? So the way we do it is through something here in nParticles called instancer. This is a geo instancer, and we're going to go to the option box here. And in the option box, we're going to select our thing we want to instance. That's a piece of geometry. And we're going to add selection. And let me do this again. I want to deselect everything because I don't want that selected. Let's do this again. Okay, nParticles, instancer option box. Let's select the object and say add selection. And it's going to add the particle to, it's going to add that geometry to nParticle shape 1. Okay, then create. Okay, so it did it. It's a little bit big. So let's bring it down. So what it did there is added that shape to every single particle. So when you look at it, it's kind of fast, but it's like being attacked by a bunch of flies or an armada of, I don't know what that looks like now to the side, but you can rotate it. You know, maybe it'd be more interesting if it had some rotation on it. Anyway, that's a concept that you can replace objects. You can replace particles with objects. All right, that's one thing you can do. Another thing you could do that's even simpler than that, that one that I just showed you was called instancer. Another thing that you can do that's even more simple than that is called it's called sprites. So I'm going to go back. Maybe I'm going to keep that one around before let's keep this one to the side. Okay, sprites are when you attach, let's say you have a picture of a fly that you drew. Like if I don't know, maybe I can find something really quick. So fly PNG, let's say PNG. Let's see, fly PNG with transparency. Okay. I'm looking up right now on the internet here. I found a fly that has some transparency to it as a PNG. That's going to be perfect. So just give me a chance to save that on the desktop. Okay, let's see if this works. So now I'm going to use sprites. And so I'm going to select the particles and go to End Particles and say Sprite Wizard. And then it's asking me to find an image to use for a sprite. And I'm going to try this PNG fly and then continue and apply. Okay, now if we hit 6, oh, I colored it pink, huh? I'm going to see the attack of the flies. Whoa. And let's slow them down a little bit and add some turbulence to make it look interesting. Okay. Let's go to outliner. Maybe I'll make them 0.3 or something really light. Right, like that. Maybe I'll give them a longer lifespan too so they don't die out. Remember we changed the lifespan? Random range. Let's have them live forever again.
Will they do that thing where if you move your camera, they will stay within the view of your camera, like
Very
you
good.
won't see the side profile?
That's right. Very good. Thank you. I've been lecturing since the morning, so like forgetting to say that. Thank you. Exactly. I'm having this brain freeze. What's really cool about sprites, and this is true in any program that I understand, is if you rotate the camera, they're always going to be facing you. Oh, creepy. It's kind of nice though. And if we want to change the behavior of that fly, let's say they're all pointed up, we wanted to rotate the sprite. There is, let's change the, right in here, particle, there should be a sprite wizard to change the, let's see, an emitter. It's going to detect the sprites in here. Let's close this stuff. Right here, sprite twist. We can change them turning and stuff. So obviously it looks like all the same fly, but what we could do is 2 or 3 or 4 clouds of particles and 3 or 4 different sprites to make it look like a bunch of different flies. Yeah. And, you know, change them turning in space or something. I don't know. And play it back at the beginning to see them. And of course, we could add turbulence to it if you'd like. Talked about that before, adding some turbulence and putting up the attenuation. to get them to fly around and stuff. And they're actually dying out because of it's the sprite wizard setting. So it's overriding that. By the way, that's why it's disappearing. Because this one, let's go back to the emitter. Particle shape. This one's on random range, should be, let's try to change it from live forever. You see how it's like overriding it? That's because that's kind of the nature of a sprite. It's got a random range. So I just put in longer, like, I don't know, maybe last 20 seconds or something, see what happens. I don't know why, but I'll try. All right, and we can go to...
Can it be butterflies instead of flies? Because it looks creepy.
Yeah, I'm here to satisfy your every possible wish and need. So you tell me, I'll put Pikachu on there if you want.
Really? Oh, I will laugh. I would really laugh if you do put Pikachu in there.
I was kind of being like, I'm kidding, but I could. And the point is, you can put, let's scale this down. These flies are too big. Flies are supposed to be small. This is what they're supposed to look like. Is that creeping you out, really? You know, flies get a bad rap. What if there are bees? Everyone's like, oh, bees are not. Well, I have to admit that flies are pretty gross. But I don't know. It's all part of the ecosystem, right? I could put something cute on there. I just grabbed, thought about insects, and that's a very common thing, right? So if we want to make them swarm around and we go to the turbulence field and put that much higher, maybe put a magnitude of 50, hopefully we'll upset them and get them to go crazy. Ooh, I don't know what they're doing now. It's a little bit too high on the turbulence. Let's take it down. Definitely some things we'll have to play with to get them to, there's different types of fields you could put on. Gravity, yes. Drag, you'd have some drag through the air like it's hitting the wind. You could have some of them blow. We talked about vortex again. Again, in turbulence, we can play with some of these and see what they do. Frequency and the phases. I think it's because sprites want to always be pointed to the camera. They're a little more tame, they're seeming like a little more tame. I want to get like them to really get randomized. I'm putting up the attenuation, and you see the attenuation is making them spit out slow and then fast and then slow. Putting the magnitude up. See how strong the turbulence effect is. Yeah, now they're really kind of swarming, getting around. And maybe they could, whoa, careful, that one fly got awfully close to us. Yeah. I'm gonna stop this and just know that under sprite attributes, sprites are used all the time, by the way, not just to do flies, but to even do puffs of smoke, even do something that looks like another type of emitter change or particle change, because being made of just sprites, they're extremely light. They really take up very little data. And let's put them back at 1. And we could probably get a feeling of they're more zipping all around and twisting and rotating. And all right, so that covers some things about changing the attributes. We've learned about emitters, how to make an emitter and all of that, controlling its behavior. And now we're learning about changing its type, its particle render type, So we can change the shape and change it from points to streaks to multi-streaks to blobby surfaces. We learned some of them only render in the hardware render. Others need to be changed to one that's recognized by software renderer. We've seen all those, and we can let you go into detail to change its color, and deeper inside each one, it could be quite extensive. If you're just trying to get stuff that looks like water droplets, pretty easy. You could even use a hardware render to do blobby things, and just render that in another pass in After Effects, and then bring it into your tunnel or whatever's in the CG background, and composite them together and smooth them in. It'll look great. Or you could even combine, if you're doing a stop motion background and you just want to do augmented effects. You wanted to add flies or rain or storm or something to something that you've made. You could just render this as a PNG or a TIFF that has an alpha channel in the background and composite them on top of a practical effect background or sculpture. So yeah, that kind of covers the two major parts that I wanted to talk about that you could do. Now, there are a lot of flies. Let's get rid of them because they're creeping out people, right? You don't want to see them, right, Eric? There's too many. Okay, let's not save them. Let's do one last thing, and it is on the schedule. I did want to, let's see, can you make the flies larger? Oh, glad I was able to answer that. Eric wanted to make it spiders. How about we save that for Halloween? All it is just simply grabbing a different file, right? I just grabbed flies. It could be money. You want just like dollar bills or 20s flying around. Anything you want. It should be a PNG file with an alpha channel, transparency back. Otherwise, you're going to see a square. You're going to see the whole square. And that's going to look weird, right? So make sure you cut out the background with an alpha channel. And yeah, you can change the size and the attributes, the sprite attributes, and that's where you can change the scale, the size of the flies, or whatever it is. All right, let's talk about one other thing. And I am recording this too. So back to the plan today, we were going to talk about colliding particles, something else. Let's say back to the tube, you wanted your tube to emit particles. For example, we can, let's say, create a polygon plane, and instead of emitting from a point, imagine this is the skin of your tunnel that you're animating. We can emit from an object. And it's taking everywhere there's a normal in the directions of the normals, and it's emitting from those normals. So if you recall, do you see those vertex normals? And in the opposite direction of the normals, it's shooting out particles. So that's how it emits from a surface. That's how it knows how to emit from the surface. It looks for those normals, and would have even more. Every time we have a CV, we're going to have a CV normals. There's CV normals and there's face normals that comprise the surface of a polygon. And that's probably too much information for right now. So let's just turn those off, vertex normals, because we're just concerned that if you had a tube, you could have particles emit from the inside of your tube, and you have to emit in the right direction. So if it's emitting in the wrong direction, you have to reverse those normals. Just like paint effects are painted and it sticks to the side that your normals are pointing. This is kind of the same, a similar strategy. You have to know what the direction is. Okay, so it's emitting from an object in the way the normals are opposing, and similar way you could do in your tube. And you got a lot more stuff emitting here. So let's do something else. Let's maybe try creating, let's create another, let's create another plane. It's fine to use a plane, a polygon plane. And before we emit anything from it, let's make this plane a little bit lighter, maybe 4x4. Yeah, it's doing this error on me that it's not wanting to. Let me get a new scene. Okay, I'm just going to do it by hand. I'm just going to create less, maybe like that, a 3x3. And I'm going to emit from the surface, same as before. Emit from object. And I'm going to do, there's an omni. You can try some of these others. There's surface. And then we have a little bit of a smattering of particles going on. Let's maybe turn up an emitter. Let's turn up the rate a bit. Let's try 500. Okay, now we got a healthy amount of particles emitting there. They're nice and dispersed. Let's change. Let's grab the nucleus and nucleus. Said that wrong. Nucleus, not nucleus. It's like people would say nuclear. I can't even say it wrong. Okay, nucleus. So let's change that to. It's a weird thing happens sometimes. My keyboard stops working, so I'm gonna just middle mouse button change it. Change it to like 2.5. Gravity. Okay, I'm having some graphics card issues and you want your particles to bang on the inside of the tube, and it's going to be able to detect the normals and knock into those and stuff like that. So we need to tell it to collide. We need to be able to tell it to collide into a surface. So let's get a surface for it to collide into. Let's go create, let's try polygon object sphere and maybe smash that sphere down a little bit and put it under. And so these particles will, right now, they're going to go through it. And our goal in showing you all this is to have the particles hit those and collide and kind of roll off it like it's a rock or a surface. So the little bit tricky step is, I mean, you would think we'd go just select these particles, shift select that, and go under end particles and say, make collide right here. That's not going to work because there's another step that needs to be done. So I'm not even going to do it because it's just going to go right through it. So the step that needs to be done now, since my 18, and they haven't fixed it, is you have to go this extra step that you select the object, and you're going to go under, don't ask me why, but this works. You go under end cloth and say, create passive collider. Out of the object it's going to hit. Like if it's a ground, or as if this would be your tube, if it's the side of the tube, you got to go and select your skin of the tunnel and then go down under end cloth. It has nothing to do with cloth, I know, but just go under end cloth and say create passive collider. That's the fix. And now when you select the particle and then you select the object, it should work, crossing fingers, when I say make collide. Let's see what happens. Okay, there it is.
So just to be sure, you only selected the sphere, right? You didn't select the particle emitter, and then you selected the end cloth?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it again. Thank you for, I wasn't explaining things well. Thank you. Let's go backwards and do that again. Step one is we're going to select the sphere, and we're going to end only the sphere, and or what that would be your tube or whatever. And then you're going to end cloth, create passive collider. And then you select your particles and shift select the sphere again, and then go to end particles, make collide. And that should work. And it's got this force field above it. That's the cloth settings I think you can change. It'd be interesting if we go to streaks, or kind of looks like a windshield or something, kind of neat. Or multi-streaks. Really looks like a downpour of rain. And yeah, if this were on the inside of your part, it would look like plumbing, like you're going through water and it's emitting from all the surface of the tube on the inside, basically pointing the way the normals are, and then splashing and hitting the sides and stuff like that. And you can render it in a different paths with multi-streaks like this, and it would look a little bit like you're going down a wacky water slide or something like that. Depends how fast you go down, right? And this is what I wanted to do, is use the blobby surface, because you really can see how those blobs are hitting, but they're going to be too big. Here we can change its, right there, radius. It's not scale, it's radius, multi-radius. Okay, so we're going to change its size, right? To, no, it didn't work. It's grayed out on me. Here, if I want to change particle change display, I'm still fussing with it. I'm trying to use blobby surface, but not have it that big and chunky, having it a smaller size, particle size. There we go. It's under particle size. Okay, right under lifespan. I thought it was going to be under these other attributes, but it wasn't. Okay, so this is now looking kind of more interesting. Check this out.
So how come the force field went away there?
Well, the force field, that one was based on the multi-streaks. That was the multi-streak one. So you can see when we change it, it's going to have a different threshold, which that can be changed. It can be changed. It has this, when you make a thing a cloth object, it's expecting that a cloth is going to hit it. So imagine if it were like your shoulders and you're going to wear a cape. So I'm using a technique halfway in cloth because when I was demoing it yesterday, it didn't work in 19, and I Googled it, and they say, oh no, in this version in 1819, you have to go through this extra step because they goofed it up. So so what it's doing when it has its raised above that, a multi-streak, it's anticipating that it's not going to collide. It doesn't want the particles to go inside your shoulder or the cloths to go inside your shoulder. It wants to leave a little bit of air, like breathing space, so there's none of those collisions. So when you use a different particle type, it really reveals those pockets of air. You know, if we like change this to, let's go down again, right? Particle shape. All right. I think this is pretty great demonstration of why people use Houdini. You know, like it's really all laid out in front of you very, very clearly in Houdini. Here's like scrolling through menus. You know, yes, we could use the hypergraph for this, and we could use different windows to look at the same stuff, like the multi hypershade and see different connections through it. But it's not really laid out very well to interact with particles. I have to admit that. So just fishing and remembering where that thing last was and the visual gestalt is, I think, very poor in Maya. And I'm always like, where was that? What tab was it? You know, looking, but you know, I don't use it every day, to be honest. So if I use it every single day, it's just a huge world, you know. You have to teach so many different aspects that, you know, we're not an effects school, and I'm sure people are kind of experts in this, could really go into detail. But anyway, if I change this to different, like that would be kind of cool if numbers flowing off like the matrix, points and multi-streaks. Well, now it's like, you can see there's a cushion on there. It doesn't want to put the particles inside. But you know, when we first did it, it was, yeah, it was like giving us an exaggerated cushion. That's just, that cushion was some type of update error, because it's supposed to give you a cushion when it's a, do you see how they're not going all the way into? When we look inside it, they don't want to go inside. It's because that's the way cloth behaves. Cloth does not absorb into your skin. And so this is the way why it's giving you that buffer. But I think it was an update error why it was so high. Like that buffer was so, you know, thick when we first saw it. And we can see it's not behaving accurately. Like it is hitting, but it's piling up in a weird way that it's not really behaving like water or absorbing. So there's another type of thing you could script in here or add, where you have the particle, when it hits the surface, the moment it hits, it's going to die. And then it's going to send another particle to roll off on the surface of water. That will look like the illusion of it's being absorbed in the surface much better. This looks a bit like sand, or it's like accumulating, pouring up sand on there or something. So,
and are those, I don't know if they are the particle effects colliding with their own particles?
No, that's a per particle. That could be done where you have particles bounce into each other. Right now, your eyes can't really detect. They're not hitting each other if they're straight down, but say we put in a lot of turbulence or gravity, they would be passing through each other, but you couldn't see it. So if you had a bunch of ping pong balls, right, and drop them and they're bouncing all over willy-nilly and they're hitting each other and that bounce in a different direction, we would definitely see that if it were happening. And that has to be set up in a per particle field. That's like, remember this field right here, the per particle behavior of position would be, I have a script that's not quite that, but it's similar, that you can cut and paste and add to it. It's like when a particle bounces, hit another particle, that particle will shoot off in a different direction. You should save often, because I do freak it out often. Let's put it back to points.
And I know there's too much to go over, but I was curious, would you use it like another end cloth or another cloth to simulate like maybe like water or something that would get dimpled by the impact of the emissions?
And then we're going to get to a point that I can say, hey, if you don't even want to set this up yourself, there are pre-made particle effects you could just drag and drop that are really common, that can work right away, right in the environment. And I'm just going to show you some of that. Because when we get into fluids, that is a particle behavior, yes, but like water and milk and viscous on a particle system, and a fluid in a system also called Bifrost, which you can learn from the ground up if you wish, and fluids in Maya. And there's stuff like fire explosives, liquids. So you're talking about, Jonathan, maybe a bit of having water inside something splash around, and how would you control that? I can't remember the exact question, but here's one under liquids, a pre-made one that's, I'm just going to drag and drop it. And it sets up a whole system here, and you need all these parts to simulate what's inside a container. And even to play it, it takes a while to update. And it does a fluid system dynamic. And I'm afraid it's going to crash, but you could customize this part. Here's a different type of emitter. It's a fluid emitter, and the fluid emanates, and you can control it more like a coherent body of liquid more than a particle, right? So that's how fluid emitters and fluid dynamics are going to work. And using the term voxel to replace pixel, and how that's collectively glomming on, creating shapes by adhering to each other. It's a spin on the idea of particles, and it's actually built off the technology of particles to create something that's very, very commonly used. Everybody wants the like fire effect or fog effect or smoke effect or water gloshing around and stuff like that. So this is some ready-made stuff you can back engineer. If you want, you can just drag and drop one into your scene and make sure you save off. And I know we're not seeing anything. We got to let it build up for a little bit more, and then back engineer it to make it work with your scene. There's ones for cloud and fog. There's burning paper. All these particle and fluid effects are already done for you. There's space. I mean, I was talking about creating a meteor, right? There's one already made for you in here, which includes a whole container system, treats a whole fluid burn shape to happen within it, and it's instructions already, and it does the per particle programming for you. If you look on like what exactly is happening in this, if you look in the outliner, break it apart, we have fluid emitters, which are a little bit different, but similar in a way from omni emitters for particles. But fluid emitters have a bit of a different modification, and they have scripting built into them to change the color of the particle as they're emitted over time. So if we go over here, we can see that it's enter play. We can see the particles are changing color over time and ending in smoke. Now, to create that from scratch, you got to know what you're doing, right? And you got to do a whole tutorial from scratch. This is already done for you. Is it cheating? I don't know. Isn't it any more than, adding some kind of polished filter in After Effects or Photoshop? What you could do is just drag and drop one of these, and then you could back engineer it to figure out how it's going to work with yours, or maybe just tweak it and put a custom look to it that fits your own and fits your own thing, and it would take far less time. So, I didn't render that, but you could see even just in a hardware render how that's looking. Okay, that's the software render, and it's looking, someone spent a lot of time to get that look out of it, right? But here it is. All you need to do is middle mouse button, drag and drop it, and then figure out how you can change its attributes, its direction, if you want to tweak its color, etc. So these are all in the content browser. And some of them take a while to render, like this nebula. It would be kind of cool if in your background, your camera moves through space nebula. This is kind of complex looking. Middle mouse button, drag. And let's play that for a little bit. Can't see what's happening. So if you zoom into it, see what it'd be like inside this nebula. This is defaulting to an Arnold render. Let's change it to a Maya and see if we can handle that. I'm not sure how much time this is going to take or it's going to crash, but just know some of these effects, drag and drop, are very heavy. There's a lot going on in it. We got one square. I'll let this go just for a little bit, see what we see. Could probably change the size of the render to go faster. We were able to talk about it. I mean, it's not in a negative way. By the way, this is our last render. This is what that stuff looks like. And it's all moving, all that nebula. It's moving, it's removing through these gases like that. It's just, you don't need to know much. You can just drag and drop these effects right in your scene and hit render, except, you know, this takes a lot of time, right? So again, it's content editor. You go into Windows, general editors, content editor, content browser, sorry. And some of the stuff, yeah, you don't have to build. It has explosions in here, an atomic explosion. Let's get rid of this. Let's try it. Nuke. I don't have to use the Arnold renderer, but it'd be interesting to see what results, the differences between Arnold and, let's stop that actually. And I'm going to use the Maya. Any of this could be utilized, put into a 3D landscape, be part of your CG landscape. Kind of cool to move through nuclear explosion. Trying to do. It's really sticky. Save the animation because calculating some of these. When I jump around on the timeline, it really doesn't like that. Particles really hate that kind of thing. Does not like me to jump around on the timeline. Whether it's fluid dynamics or particles or what, really there's kind of the basis of the same technique. Doesn't want to do that. So just simulating what it would be like to have like a camera animation move into a fluid explosion like this. It's just a cigarette. This might be, I should have shown this to my other class. It was just a character with a prop. We're talking about constraining props. Maybe you have a character that's smoking a cigarette and students have no clue how to make, maybe you can make the cigarette, but how to make the smoke coming out of it. Maybe you don't have to. Just download this one. It's not download, it's there already. Just content browser, middle mouse button, drag it into the scene and then constrain it. Be nice if that glowed a little bit. There you go. It's glowing too much.
And you have a skylight on right now, I'm assuming?
Oh, to light it?
Yeah.
No, I don't think there is. I mean, if there was a skylight there, it would have been part of the package. And it would just drag and drop. I literally did nothing. I just drag and drop it. And if there is, and it's already there, I don't see it. We could always look and see what the contents have here. And
because I thought, I mean, it's different from like drag and drop, but whenever you made something like an Arnold, it wasn't going to show up unless you
that's
added,
right.
added lights.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. If I render this in Arnold, it's not going to see some of the older effects because these effects have been around for a while. Actually, it's not bad. It sees the smoke just fine, but it's not doing the glow thing. And it's a bit dark because, yeah, it doesn't really have the lighting, right? So yeah, if we created one in the lights, or even if we just put like a big shape like white, and reverse the normal direction. Oh, I guess we cut out the light. That's what we did. We're blocking the light right now. So yeah, I was just trying something physical, but no, I didn't really add anything else to it. It's this only directional light. If I look in the different types of lights, there's only just this directional light. Materials, it's everything involved. Yep. By the way, if you want to add fire to the tube or something, or an object in the tube, one fast and cheap way, you could just grab like a sphere like that. Say that's the sphere inside the tube that's going on a ride, and the path animation. Just in effects, go to effects in the menu set, select the object you want, and then click fire. And this will be burning. I can see it too well until you render it. Well, this fire looks pretty cheesy, admittedly. But you can play with it like anything in Maya. You can go in and change the random, the color, lifespan, all that's, you see how that talked about the programming of the particles, how the particles are behaving here already at randomly sized. Right, you can go into that and tweak it. Or there's some of this stuff in the content editor that's a fluid that looks much better, looks more realistic. I know I checked a million times with you guys, but you can see my render view window, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's a weird thing, like some windows, when I just rendered that, you can see the new render view coming up. There's some windows that don't show, and I don't have evidence on side to side, but I guess it's showing anything inside the window is fine, anything in my. But like if I grab something that wasn't part of the My app and put it into this share screen, you wouldn't see it. So that's a thing I have to pay attention to. All right, but you can't see the render. Oh, water effects too. We have pre-made water and ocean effects like this. That's a concoction of particles and fluids, fluid particles and dynamics, and soft body surfaces. It's just ready-made, and you just change it to your liking.
I have a question. Are all these already looped, or would we have to make it loopable?
I don't think they're looped. It's a good question. Yeah. I don't think so. I think you could, let's see. Very good question. Good one. They may just go on forever, but I don't think they're ever going to meet a point where, they're going to be exactly the same. I doubt it. Let's see. I put it on 2000. I'm just going to watch it go. I mean, there's so many things changing. Even it's the shape of the wave. You've got this mist coming off. That could be kind of a cool landscape that you can modify and change in After Effects. But what you'd probably have to do to get 3 minutes out of this, if you're doing an ocean landscape for that long, is just decide on a length that is renderable for your system. And if that's 20 seconds, it's 20 seconds. So you have 480 frames, and render it, and just take that bit into After Effects and just try to slowly fade, cross dissolve one into the other. Clever. So you can't detect it, or maybe have something you could distract and maybe go in front of the camera to block the perception of where that seam is, where it starts again. That's what I would do. I would maybe do 30 seconds of this, render that out, and then loop it. And you can if it renders fast, like this one renders fast, you could do 3 minutes. It's going to be 4,000 some frames. If you can handle rendering 4,000 frames of this or so, pretty cool. I'm curious what's inside this. So let's break it apart a little. It's an ocean plane, transform node. You can change the colors here. Make it more like, I don't know, what would look like more green? I don't see much of a change. Giant storm cam, default light set. All these make a difference. The directional lights and the fluid itself. They all work together in a package. It's crazy crows outside.
It's crow season, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's Edgar Allan Poe season, like Halloween, and the weather's getting nice and crisp.
Older, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something about particle effects. Since we can manipulate the colors for Nova, I was thinking of using that for the tunnel.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of making mine like more ethereal, almost like heavenly, but with sacred geometry.
Yeah, cool.
Because I already have like 2 props I modeled that was from a previous class, like the eye and some mouths, and I wanted to like model inside the tunnel.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to try attempt to do.
Yeah, do tests. Just take steps at it right away and see what the render times would be. And I suggest using a Maya software renderer, because I don't want you to get in trouble. Like, it's just looking, maybe one frame looks awesome with Arnold, but then there's no way you could do more. Okay. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Professor?
Hey there. Hey, Andrew.
Hi. So for this assignment, even though I do have access to Maya, whenever I use Maya, there is when I try to access Maya remotely through my computer, there is like a lag, of course.
Oh, okay.
And so I've decided, since I can use a different animation tool, again, I'm going to use like Blender, because it's just a lot easier to work with.
Please, yes. And yeah, just what can I say? Blender in a lot of ways is going to be easier and more intuitive to use anyhow than Maya. Of course, the limitations would come later, but if you could set up a landscape in space in 3D, it doesn't have to be a tunnel. If you want to set them up like like you want to build features in 3D and set them up on a plane, and you want to just move a camera through it. In fact, you can hand keyframe it. You don't need to do anything precisely the way I demoed it in Maya or try to replicate it in Blender. You know, I'm just giving a lot of wild different examples to do digitally a moving landscape. As long as it meets the specs of moving landscape, you can move, and it's going to last for 3 minutes in a way that you can blend it in After Effects. You can use any technique to do that. The only thing you can't do is video. And
Well,
I know.
well, I'm happy that you brought up the camera because as I am trying to work on my background, I want to animate the camera and I'm having trouble doing it. I don't know if you could help me.
Sure.
Okay.
How do you want to do it though? Do you want to share your what way you're comfortable for interacting?
Okay, yeah, I'll share my screen.
Okay, let me get out
Okay.
of here.